Hello and welcome. My name is Kim Utani and I'm the Director of Programming of the Sundance Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed our world premiere screening of Passing. And now it's my absolute pleasure to present to you the writer-director of Passing, Rebecca Hall.
Hello.
Rebecca.
Hi. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching it. Who's out there? I'm here with the rest of some of the cast. We've got in a virtual wait room somewhere. I'd like to invite Andre Holland, the wonderful Andre Holland, and Ruth Negger, extraordinary Ruth Negger, and of course Tessa Thompson. These people.
Well, congratulations to all of you. So lovely to see you all. You can't see the chat, so I'll just tell you that people have been saying beautiful, I'm in awe, wow, stunning, absolutely haunting. So I would say great feedback. And congratulations, this is such an honor for us to be presenting this film. And we will take some questions. Actually, I'll do the first few questions, but I want to just let the audience at home to know that we invite you to submit questions. So please drop them into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. So for all of you, I want to just present this question. This film is based on Nella Larsen's novel Passing, and I'm wondering what connection did each of you have to the source material, if any, and why was it important to you to tell this story? Starting with you, Rebecca, how about?
Sure. My connection with the source material was that someone happened to hand it to me at a very precise moment in my life when I was asking more questions, thinking more deeply about some of the unresolved, mysterious aspects of my mother's family's history. My mother's from Detroit, Michigan, and her father was almost certainly African-American, white passing. And his parents, I've now realized from doing some internet searching, could well have been white passing also. So at that time, there wasn't really language for that in my family. We weren't saying terms like that. We weren't talking about passing. We weren't talking about anything like that, even biracial identity. It was a sort of confused area, as it often is with these stories, because you get drips and drabs of information get passed down, and it's a history that is necessarily hidden. And when I read this book, I think it gave me some historical context for the choices that my grandfather made, and possibly those before him, and some understanding. And it also gave me, I had a very strong emotional response to the women in it. For a lot of reasons. And I found it an extraordinary piece of literature. And primarily because of that, I felt it would make an extraordinary movie, and I had a strong sense of how I wanted it to be made. I certainly didn't have the confidence when I was 25 to do it, but I did write a screenplay then, and then I let it gestate and sit and think and incubate for a long time. And eventually having people in my life that I sort of slowly showed it to, including these people that you're looking at, who had faith in it, got to this point extraordinarily. 14 years later, possibly 13 or 14. It's kind of hard to believe that we are actually here, but we are. That's my story with it.
How about you, Tessa?
I hadn't read the book until I heard about the project, and it was sent to me, and I read it and I couldn't shake it. It really haunted me. And then I read Rebecca's screenplay, which I thought was such an incredible adaptation of a book that in its slim 93 pages manages to talk about so many things. So it felt like a really ambitious thing to try to figure out how to tell this in narrative form. And I was so struck, I really couldn't shake it, and just felt so lucky that Rebecca, asked me to come along for the ride, and I knew that Ruth was going to play Claire, and when you read the book, Irene is so struck by Claire, so beguiled by her from when they were children, and again when they meet again that time in Chicago, and I couldn't think of another actress that I'd want to do that with more than Ruth. It felt very easy to be very enamored by her. And so I knew it would be a really rare gift to get to do that. And that part at least would be easy. The rest of it would be hard.
And Ruth?
Thank you, Tess. I had read the book a few years ago, and I think it's a masterpiece. I found it to be incredibly heart-aching and heartbreaking. And I just was so drawn to the relationship between these two women, and what compelled them towards each other, and why they were drawn to one another. And it's a really fascinating analysis, really, of friendship, with all the ups and downs. And I found it fascinating that they're drawn to one another because of they admire something in the other that each lacks, and so they kind of circle each other with a kind of admiration, but there's also a sort of a certain envy there, and and it's I think it's quite rare that you see all those complexities and nuances in female friendship. And of course, I was so sort of crushed by the psychological cost of feeling you have to make a decision to sever yourself from your community and essentially from oneself in order to survive, is what Claire does. But I feel like she sort of bucks the narrative that is tragic mulatto, because I don't think Claire thinks of herself as tragic at all. And she sort of almost relishes the fact that she is passing, that she's conning people around her. But there's also the burden of longing. And in order to do that, and in order to thrive, she's lost something which is key to her soul, which is her community. And it's such an interesting analysis of that. And in order to live, one has to make compromises, which seem so desperately unfair. But that was the reality for many people.
And lastly, Andre?
Yeah, I had not read the book before Rebecca approached me with it. So I read it right away, and was surprised to find that my mother had read it and had a really close relationship with it, as did several other women in my family and women in my life. So I knew right away that I better pay attention to it. And then I was really struck by both the book itself and then obviously the adaptation that Rebecca wrote. And I think most of all, though, I was thrilled to get a chance to work alongside these three fantastic artists that I'm sharing the screen with right now.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, as speaking for the Sundance programming team, we were really excited to see this as a debut film. And there's so many interesting aspects to this film, like technically. The black and white, the 4:3 aspect ratio, sound design, production, costumes. And so much of this is woven just beautifully into the storytelling. Rebecca, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of these decisions and just your vision as you started delving into this film.
Yeah, I mean, I had a strong feeling that it needed to be black and white pretty much from the first adaptation that was 13 years ago. My reasoning for this was that it felt illuminating. It wasn't just a stylistic choice. It felt that it was a conceptual choice, that to make a film about colorism, in part about colorism, that drains the color out of it and asks you to look at it as an abstraction, as a something that is symbolic. You look at something in black and white, you accept it, but you are undergoing a process of translation. And similarly, like when we sort of look at faces in the world, I think there's a sense of, we look at faces and then we immediately put them into these categorizations of this and this and this and this. And the categorizations become important, but they're also in some sense sort of absurd. Nobody's actually black and white. Film isn't black and white, it's gray. And, and I think that too, not to be sort of facetious about it, but it kind of appealed to me because I feel that this is a story of nuance and gray areas and ambiguity, and it asks you to hold one thing and its opposite at the same time, all the time. We're talking about a character like Claire, and she's, it's exactly what Ruth was saying about she bucks the trajectory or the sort of idea of the tragic mulatto, because there is really nothing tragic about her. Her situation is tragic, but she's everything, she's man, woman, gay, straight, black, white. She's duality walking around incarnate, and she's able to be whatever she needs to be to live. And then you have Irene, who thinks that she is living correctly, thinks that she's morally on the right path, and everything else threatens that. But the truth is, as we start to see over the course of the film, you start to realize that she's in denial about so many aspects of herself that it's causing her to implode. So yeah, I guess black and white weirdly helps with all these things. The aspect ratio was also an early choice. For me, I have always loved old cinema. I grew up watching old black and white movies, and something that, I've noticed over the course of television becoming incredibly innovative is that it also has become increasingly filmic. And part of the language of that is anamorphic, widescreen, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, weirdly for me now, I sort of want to see something cinematic that's a little different than that. And when I see those old movies that are just a little narrower, also Pavel Pawlowski, someone who's also been using this as well, it's not like, there's precedent for this recently, I get so excited, and I've always loved it. And for me, it was a choice that was made some time ago, but I never thought I'd quite get away with it, especially since I was already asking people to do black and white. So it always felt like a bit of a reach, but somehow we managed it. It was really about, if you take a frame and you literally squeeze it down so that there's no room for anything but the face, I think you sort of signal to the audience that this is a film about scrutinizing a face and what the face wants to project out to the world, and how it is seen, and how you look at it, and how it looks back out. Because Claire and Irene, they're negotiating each other's meaning all the time by how they look at each other, not so much what they say at each other. They're sort of defining the terms all the time. There's this, I think of it as a love story. Yes, it is a very complex friendship, and it is deeply, but there's also this sort of undercurrent of something very potent and erotic, frankly. But it's quiet and it's not realized, and it's suppressed and oppressed by the grander scheme of the world that they're living in. There's not room for that. There's not room for honesty about that. I could keep going, waffling on, but somebody should probably ask me a question.
Well, that was a great answer. Thank you. So the audience has a few questions. This is also kind of a technical question. It's about the use of sound. Aviva wants to know, it says, the use of sound in this film is absolutely incredible and so precise. We hear breathing, glasses clinking, and even I think a moment or two of heartbeats. Can you talk about why you wanted ambient sound to take on such a life of its own in the film?
I'm really happy to have this question. This was a real point of obsession for me with the movie. I was obsessed with wanting it to be quiet, but not silent, obviously. But I wanted every sound that you heard to either take you precisely to Irene's experience or tell you something specific about a mood that she can't control. So I was never particularly interested in realistic sound as much as expressionistic. And every choice is, thank you for noticing it, this person who asked this question, because every choice was specific. Every car horn that you hear, every bird tweeting, it's placed and thought about. And there's really not a lot of extra on it. And part of it as well was I was fascinated by how you make an audience, for want of a better, different expression, lean in and take notice, because there's nothing straightforward about this narrative. There is nothing obvious. People don't really say what they feel all the time. And you have to really listen and pay attention if you're going to get the rewards of what Nella Larsen's asking you to contend with. So I was always fascinated by, my suspicion was that sound was going to be the way that happened, by making you feel at times a little bit off your center, and other times alienated, and other times frightened. And it's a way of tension. And and I think the choice to not have sound sometimes, it's not a heavily scored movie, and the piece of music that you hear all the way through it was something that's been with me for a long time. A piece of music I found, probably 6 years ago now. Definitely the last couple of drafts of the film, I was writing to that tune. Emma Hoy Guebro, and it's called Homeless Wanderer, funnily enough, and it was written a long time ago in the 60s. And that's very specific for me. It's like, it always felt to me like it's Claire's melody, but it doesn't play when Claire's on screen so much because it's stuck in Irene's head. That was the way I thought about it. And there's a sort of unresolved quality about it, that it's like being stuck on a loop, that she's stuck on a loop of Claire. She can't get the melody out of her head. And the other piece of music that you hear in the movie that recurs is a trumpet player who lives somewhere on the block, who's sort of representative of Harlem in a way, who is practicing and working out his voice. Like, he doesn't know who he is as a trumpet player. And that to me was more Irene's melody, weirdly. Like, she's trying to work out who the hell she is in relation to this world. And as the film progresses, the trumpet starts to become more like Homeless Wanderer. And these were all elements that I very deliberately thought about for a long time and chose to do, and how that factored in with the whole sound mix, on a broader scale, which I was very lucky to have a wonderful experience of doing because of the thank you Dolby for the Atmos as well.
Excellent. This is a question for Tessa. Aubrey wonders, says, Tessa, Irene is so restrained and almost an enigma. How do you play a character where so much is going on inside but not always seen?
I don't know. I don't. you try. I felt a deep compassion for Irene. She lives very much in her head, and I understand what that can be like sometimes. As I can be quite I can be quite heady myself, and this I don't know, this preoccupation with being good, I think, is something that I was really interested by. This preoccupation with responsibility and the ways in which that hems you up. Like, I don't at all relate to Irene, and that's partially privilege in terms of feeling boxed in or confined by constructions like gender, for example. But I understand responsibility, this need and feeling of responsibility to community, for example, and what that looks like. And I don't know, I found playing Irene really, I guess my answer is I don't know how to play it, because it eluded me every day and terrified me every day, which is why I really wanted to play the part. I guess there were moments on set. I think there was a scene I played with Ruth and another with Andre, and we'd get done, and I remember feeling really unsettled by the fact that people would see it. This idea that things had been immortalized, I found really mortifying, actually. And I think that has a great deal to do with the environment of intimacy that Rebecca provided us, because I know in my headiest moments, if anyone were to see me spiraling in my thoughts, I would feel really exposed. And I think the beauty of getting to make these things, the beauty that you capture it, is you get to go to those places, and you know that the person on the other end, hopefully, is someone that has an incredible amount of love and trust, not just for you, but for the character that you're playing. And I felt really held by Rebecca. So I guess the long-winded answer is you don't do it unless you can do it in the company of people that you trust and admire. And this was that in spades for me.
I don't know. I will just add that I watched you do it on a daily basis, and it was a live wire act. It is by no means easy to play a character that has no catharsis, no outlet, is just so hemmed in by their own repression, everyone else's oppression, the whole 9 yards. It's a very claustrophobic space to operate from, and very vulnerable making. And you just went there, with your head and your soul, and it was very thrilling to watch. And it's really not easy to play anything that's quiet and still allow the camera to see everything, the inner world. And that was, watching Tessa do that was really remarkable. And Ruth just sent me on a thrill ride every day, because I'd have no idea what she was going to do, and it just was in the best possible way. Like, I couldn't see it. I had no idea how she was going to play this character, but I knew she was going to be dazzling, and it was. I was just, every day I'd be like, I want to see it. I want to see what they're going to do. And while I'm on the subject, I'm just going to talk about Andre as well. I know no one's asked me, but I'm going to go there. But this man has so much just core humanity. It's just so there in everything that every line that he utters. He was so completely embodied and fluid and easy as Brian. It was just, I just watched them work,
For the actors, I'm curious if as Rebecca is an actor herself, did you find that there was a collaboration that was different than working with other directors who might not have that kind of background? Perhaps Ruth?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, first of all, she just emanates kindness, you know. And I would echo Tessa saying, like, every day one felt held, you know. And it was definitely a feeling I never, even though, you know, you're full of doubt and it's so challenging, you really hope that you will sort of convey the essence of this human being who you fall in love with. But I never worried, because Rebecca was so prepared and she knew and knows these women intimately. And so I felt like super safe. And when you feel safe, you can fly, you know, and that has to come from her compassion for her fellow actors. But you know, and that percolated the whole set and vibe, you know. I think everyone felt acknowledged, and part of this great big team heaving every day to make something beautiful. And I think it emanates and vibrates off the screen.
Absolutely. We have a question for Andre. This is from Sarah. Coming into this project with such a strong female-centric story and hearing from women in your family, did this impact the manner you approach the role?
I guess a bit, in the sense that, you know, I was really eager to sit down and shut up and stay out of the way and see what I could learn. You know, that's how it is in the household that I grew up in. And, you know, I just, like I said before, was just really excited to learn from Ruth and Rebecca and Tessa. And, you know, so many, like with Marcy Rogers, you know, who did such beautiful work with the wardrobe, you know. Yeah, I guess it did. It gave me an opportunity to just watch and learn and try and support. And I hope that I can continue to do that for these and for other women as well.
And Alex has a question for Rebecca. The shot compositions felt very reminiscent of films made during this era. Were there specific films that you looked to for inspiration in terms of how to frame the film?
Yes, there were, and they sort of range from they sort of jump all over the map, honestly. I mean, it's not quite as straightforward as black and white films from that period. I suppose there's a couple of films that I thought about a lot in relation to creating a sort of suspense within a house out of objects and playing out narrative beats on things rather than people sometimes, which I think I took that inspiration from Hitchcock, frankly. There's the like Shadow of a Doubt, and there's also a Joseph Losey film called The Servant, which I thought about a bit made a little bit later in the 60s. There's a film called, there's Notorious, that I thought about that film a fair amount. What are my other influences? There's so many, but then also I can like spin off and think about ways in which Wong Kar-wai or there's that film Silent Light. I thought about that film a lot in terms of the tone and the mood. I don't know. There's so many. I mean, I'm a cinema junkie. You know, there's so many films that I feel are so important, and I, in some quiet way, homage in this. And you know, Night of the Hunter even is something. You know, there's so many. I could really go on about this for some time, but ultimately, I don't know. It sort of became its own beast at a certain point. You know, and that's. I'm really in debt also to Edu Grau, my cinematographer, who really got what I was looking for and found a language. Like he's so, you know, I would say things like, this lives in a sort of dream poetry space more than a realism space. So the black and white, I don't want the black and white to look digitalized or crisp or clean in any way. I want it to be, and I remember at one point he arrived with this lens and he was like, you know, this is a lens, it's an anamorphic lens, and it makes everything sort of blurry on the top and the bottom. But if you compress it into 4:3, it sort of does this kind of painterly thing. A Lomo is the lens, if anyone's interested. And it was just a stroke of genius, honestly, because it was exactly the palette and the painterly sort of look I was looking for. Because I do think there is an element, it was something that I spoke about a lot to everyone that was on set, Edu and Marcy Rogers, the just unparalleled, brilliant costume designer who managed to pluck beauty out of midair, it would feel like, and Nora Mendes and everyone in the team. I would keep saying there is a world where the film itself is passing, you know, everything is passing and everything has a performative aspect, and the film also does, in the sense that it's passing for reality, it's black and white, it's this and that, but we have to sort of find ways to make that, bring it that formality and that formalism and the look of it and the composition and how we tell a story. So there were a lot of influences, and I am astonished that everyone understood what the hell I was talking about and delivered it so beautifully. Because it was a tough ask, I think, in retrospect. But they did.
That's great. Thank you so much for these thoughtful answers, and the people in the chat are very excited and about how you talk about this film, and sadly our time is up, but I do want to mention that people are very interested in the ending. I personally did not want to go there in this conversation because it's, you know, spoilers, but there's also, you know, obviously so much to unpack with that. So everybody should see this film. That's what I think. And we can have really interesting conversations. This is part of the reason that I was really passionate about showing this film, is I knew that this film would inspire a lot of conversation. So I want to thank Rebecca, Ruth, Tessa, and Andre for being here. And, you know, congratulations on this film. As for the audience, thank you for attending this Q&A. And if you want to rewatch this Q&A, a link to the recording of it will appear on the film page in our film program guide. So you can check that out. And pass holders are invited to head over to Film Party and New Frontier now, newfrontier.sundance.org. Again, thank you all so much. And it's really been a privilege to show this film and to, you know, launch your career as a director, Rebecca, into the orbit. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.